currently suspended South Carolina defensive back. She says that it did not go down the way that she prescribes it to. She said, basically, in a Twitter quote, "Don't believe what you read. The allegations against Javon Charleston should be dropped immediately. I am his former girlfriend, and the girl mentioned in the article, in no way did he ever hit me, ever, or threaten to harm me. This was blown out of proportion. Justice will do him right." Thing that I at least kind of look back to, Corn, is like we've said before, we never push any judgment until more of these things kind of come about. But like I said, it's still a sticky situation for South Carolina's defensive back in a position, by the way, that they can't afford any attrition.
You're talking about a guy that rose to the position of starter coming out of the spring, well, in terms of the depth chart. So, yeah, we talked about this on Friday, and the one thing we did say to counter the story was, hey, let's wait and see what happens when all the facts come out. And who's to say if this is factual or not? They'll investigate it, and the officials will move on from there. But, you know, it's just something that's got to be given time to be run full circle. And, you know, if he's innocent of the charges, if it all sticks from the standpoint of what this person is saying and then decide to drop the charges, then he should be, well, you would think he would be reinstated and cleared and all of that sort of stuff. But, you know, South Carolina tried to get a football player in school a couple of years ago who played at Florida. Remember him? Defensive back. And had some issues, got arrested, charged with some things, went to court, was found innocent, and still he had to go out to went to a junior college, you know, to get his eligibility back, which he did, and then the SEC still wouldn't let him transfer into the league because of these charges against him, despite the fact that he beat the charges. He was cleared by a jury. I think he ended up going to, it was Maryland, I believe.
So,
C.J. Jackson was his name.
So a lot of
J.C. Jackson.
So a lot of rules passed after Cam Newton went through, and they both hurt South Carolina. Apparently, when you think about Brian Bowen, where they mentioned Cam's dad was in Brian gone.
Yep.
Because you can't do that anymore. And then somebody, and Cam was what, cited for stealing laptops at Florida? Now, had this happened to him and he transferred to South Carolina.
Yeah, transferred. Yeah.
This brings up another thought too. You know, USC and I guess other schools as well. I can't cite, you know, on the record exactly who, but South Carolina, if you get arrested on a serious charge, you know, you're automatically suspended before you even have your
day in court,
your first day in court. And you, and most of the time it's warranted,
right?
But sometimes it's not. And, you know, that negatively affects the young person who was charged erroneously, if it turns out to be that way. And, you know, I think that I don't know what you can do legally from a legal standpoint. If your reputation is damaged, your career is hurt, because, you know, when you try to move on, say you're good enough to go to the league, they say, well, why were you suspended, you know, for 2 months or whatever, or 6 weeks, whatever the case may be.
I think that's part of the agreement that they signed. I think it's something that's in the athletic handbook. I mean, it's something that's visibly stated that this is something that's a deal.
I think, you know, what they did was they took this off the back of the coaches.
Right.
You know, now it wasn't left up to a coach to decide whether to suspend you, because we all know that coaches did not want to suspend their best players. They'd go to the ground with them.
Right.
This takes that off of them with an automatic suspension. If you're arrested for something, you know, more major than a jaywalk, they'll suspend you immediately.
And this is really the first opportunity for us to, I don't want to say test the mettle of Will Muschamp, but really test, you know, what he's going to tolerate, what he's going to put up with. This really, I think, would be the first, I would say, off the field, I don't even want to call it a scandal, but first off the field situation involving a member of his football team since he's been here.
You know, Spurrier had a very clear rule.
Yes.
If you hit a woman, you're done. And really, I think he wouldn't even wait to hear your side of it. If you were accused of it, he pretty much kicked you to the curb. He would not tolerate anything related to domestic violence of any kind. And I mean, no coach can. No, I mean, or anybody in any walk of life. But I'm sure that if Muschamp's investigation, you know, USC's investigating this as well. You know, Muschamp has brought him in and talked to him. And if he's convinced that he did the crime, then I'm sure he's going to punish him severely, if not dismiss him from the team. Yeah, but if it's found to be the other way, then you've got to lift that suspension as soon as possible.
And of course, you got to look at the guy's character. For one thing, is he actually walked on and earned a scholarship. Now, when you talk about on the field value, we can talk about him earning a starting position in the spring, but the big key is what he showed last year, special teams. He was usually the first guy down.
We'll talk about this more. We'll continue to hear from you as well. 800-956-7266 on Twitter at SportsTalkSC. A possible reunion with a Clemson basketball player. We'll talk about that coming up next, and an update and a preview for the College World Series.
This is the place to talk Tigers, Gamecocks, and more. Sports talk across the state on the South Carolina Radio Network.
Welcome in. Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. 800-956-7266 is the phone number. That's how you get in touch with us here on this Monday. This was something I found rather interesting, and we'd kind of heard some rumblings about this over the course of the last couple of weeks, but now some of the Clemson insiders are starting to kind of bring this to the forefront. You remember David Skara, of course, man who came in as a transfer and was a real big help to Clemson's defense. Wasn't much of a scoring threat. He was a surprise departure from Brad Brownell's squad after the season a year ago here. And, you know, looked at his possible professional prospects. He wanted to possibly go back overseas. He's from Croatia. Looked at a possible reunion back there in Europe with some sort of professional opportunities. But after testing the professional waters, according to first reported by Larry Williams of Tiger Illustrated, it's been echoed by some of the other insiders there. According to at least those guys, there seems to be mutual interest in bringing Skara back for that final scholarship that remains on Brad Brownell's squad, which I think, Corn, is a no-brainer.
That is certainly a bonus if indeed it works out that way. You're talking about a guy that had some really good moments for you. You mentioned the defensive side of things. He gives a big guy with a lot of wingspan who can guard out on the perimeter. Not a really good offensive player. You know, did not give him much from that standpoint. And when he gave him something offensively, it was a nice bonus for him. But you know, if you get him back, you're talking about a guy that has experience and helped you get to all the way to meet Kansas in the Sweet 16, and that would be, you know, a very nice summertime gift for the Tigers for Brad Brownell and company, something that probably was totally unexpected when he decided to go ahead and pursue the professional opportunities. You know, they had a player who had been looking at them as a potential transfer from Towson. He came in for a visit last week. I think he's visiting Seton Hall this weekend. What is it? Zane Martin, I believe his name. And he was at Clemson last weekend, not this past weekend, but the weekend before. Seton Hall, Gonzaga's been in on him as well. He's out of Philadelphia. And so, you know, maybe if with this Skara situation coming up, that maybe they've decided to hold off on this guy and wait and see what Skara decides to do.
Well, I always have questions with the NCAA on this. We know what happens in the NBA. If Skara's overseas, do they go and investigate over in Europe that no agent was involved in any of his?
He did not sign with an agent. He didn't sign with an agent, according to the public reports, and that is the reason why he could come back. See, this is kind of where I kind of lean on the fact that people are talking about how much these NCAA and NBA rules seem to be very incongruous. He didn't necessarily declare for the NBA draft because he felt like he wasn't going to be drafted, and don't think he would have been. But the one thing that he did do was he announced his intentions to leave. Now, he can just as easily re-enroll in school and be back on the basketball team, be back on scholarship very easily with a grant and aid agreement. But the fact remains here is that if you look at Clemson and he comes back, you're basically looking at the same starting lineup that ended last year. If you put him in at the kind of small forward position that's vacated by Gabe DeVoe, maybe you make a little bigger lineup, or maybe you put him at power forward and throw A.J. Oliver in at the 3. So, I mean, you're looking at very much the same type of lineup you had last year.
I think you're looking at a lineup like this. I think you'll have Eli Thomas in the middle. You'll have Reed and Mitchell starting in your back court. You'll have I'm thinking you'll have Amir Sims probably starting at the 3, and if he comes back, you can have Skara starting at the 4. You have Javon White coming off the bench as your number 2 big man. You'll have A.J. Oliver and Clyde Trapp coming off the bench in the back court. You'll have another big in Trey Jameson, who might, I don't know, he might need a redshirt year. Right. And if you got the other 2 bigs ahead of him, why not redshirt him? But Hunter Tyson and John Newman III, signees, 6'8" and 6'5", can give you some depth as well. And of course, there's Malik Williams. So
Clyde Trapp also can play himself into a role that's larger.
They look really good on paper going into this coming season. Now, this is what if you're Brad Brownell, This is what South Carolina wasn't able to do.
Retain guys.
Well, no. What I'm saying is they made their Final Four run and, of course, lost 4 key players,
exactly.
weren't able to replace them, and had a down year. Now, Brad Brownell's got a chance to really build on that Sweet 16 run by virtue of the fact that these guys are coming back. That's a great position to be, and that's how you build something in terms of a program and the momentum. And, you know, we often talk about the decisions that athletic directors don't make that pay off. And by that, we mean sticking with a guy, even though I do think that Brownell was walking the plank there for a little while at Clemson. And I think Dabo Sweeney really pitched in hard to Dan Radakovich and said, listen, you know, give this guy a chance, because, you know, he went from his first season to last season without making the NCAA tournament. That's a long, dry spell for any basketball coach. And Radakovich stuck with him. And whether it was just by luck or by his smarts, it looks like it's going to pay off now.
Well, the key thing is when you're at a program like Clemson, the first thing you got to figure out, is your coach a good technical X and O man? Because you're going to need that person, because you're not going to play with the same deck that North Carolina and Duke has. So you better be able to deal with them from a technical standpoint, which Brad Brownell has done on several occasions. Now, if he gets that talent in and then they stay for a few years, then he's got something to work with. Because NC State found out that, hey, we're sitting here in the research triangle. We're big-time ACC. We can get any coach we want. What did they figure out? No, you can't. So if you got a good coach, hold on to him.
I only question, and this is something that, you know, I've kind of butted heads with Brownell personally. Not personally, but like when he says something, I'll probably say the opposite of him.
You've butted heads with him?
Well, I wouldn't say butt heads.
You just said it.
I butt philosophy, if you will. I don't like.
Did you butt butts?
No.
I don't like the heavy reliance on the three.
I think you would lose.
The heavy reliance on the 3-point shot. Stop it. The fact that they were not only so committed to the 3-point shot, but when they weren't hitting 3-point shots, you knew Clemson wasn't going to win. And I think you saw that in some of their very key losses. You saw the game against Kansas. And the other part of this is you lose a significant volume scorer in Gabe DeVoe, who's picking up that slack. I think you need to kind of start more of that defensively, maybe even turn it into more of a running team, a lot more fast break type situation, more inside-out play. And Eli Thomas has to come into his own as a confident offensive player. That's if you're looking at real concerns going forward for Clemson with this group, they need to figure out a way to diversify their offense into a way that makes their ability to score the 3-pointer not their only trick in the bag.
Well, I think you're right on that, but I also think the biggest reason they were good last year compared to the previous year, they figured out how to play defense.
True.
With this crowd.
Yeah.
Because those guys didn't play defense worth a lick.
No.
2 seasons ago. I mean, they had all come in from situations where they were the guys, all these transfers, and they wanted to jack it up and play offense. They didn't want to play defense. Somewhere in there in that offseason, he convinced them to play defense. And I remember talking to Brad at the ACC basketball media day in Charlotte. We did our little one-on-one with him, and Eli Thomas came up, and he said, you know, Eli, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here what he said, but he said we had to have a heart-to-heart. We weren't getting along real well. We weren't seeing eye to eye. He wasn't playing the way I wanted him to play, and it clicked. And you saw how good he was this past season. He became more of the player that Brad Brownell wants him to be and needs him to be. That more than anything else, to turn around in the defensive approach is what I think got that team to the Sweet 16.
And when you recall when they had to run in Rebels at Las Vegas, Jerry Tarkanian, his teams never saw the basketball for 2 weeks of practice. What did they practice? Defense, because they turned people over, and that's how they got their running game going.
Somebody in the Midlands runs this program very similarly, and that's Frank Martin. We'll come back and we'll talk about a very, very familiar face getting a big, big raise. Welcome back, Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Well, we have a final that is set. Arkansas and Oregon State will get underway at some point in time tonight from Omaha. They're dealing right now with a what I like to call the sunshine delay. They've been dealing with some weather involving the lightning, and of course they have to wait the requisite amount of time. It looks like we are going to get Blaine Knight and Luke Heimlich. Heimlich last threw on Friday, but did not throw much. He's not done well since going to Omaha, so we'll see if that turns around for him and Oregon State. Knight, of course, who we saw against USC, he was, of course, one of their big keys into getting themselves to this. By the way, the only team who has beaten Arkansas during this NCAA tournament is South Carolina in that second regional, super regional game, rather, in Fayetteville. That's the only loss they've taken at the NCAA tournament to this point, and they had 47 up and 19 down, getting ready to face Oregon State. But before that, Corn, let's talk about a man who, at least we know from his playing days at Citadel, will now be taking over a team that at least had a chance to go to this final series, but did not, and that's our man Chris Lemonis. Yeah,
I'll tell you what, his name comes up, every time there's a major opening. His name was mentioned with South Carolina, and obviously that didn't happen. And now he gets a chance to go to Mississippi State, where, he's going to improve his pocketbook quite a bit, and the pressure to win and win big will be increased as well. I wonder if he will bring, I hope my memory, no, I'm getting it confused with Michigan. The pitching coach, no, I think it's the pitching coach at Indiana is the former Clemson pitching coach, the native of Georgetown. Come to me, somebody. I have to look it up.
Kyle Bunn?
Kyle Bunn. Is he at Indiana?
He is still at Indiana, yes.
Okay, I wonder if Kyle Bunn will go with them to Mississippi State, or if perhaps he'll be in the running to be the new head coach at Indiana.
I know that he was going to keep one of the assistants. I believe that's one of the reports out there, that he was going to keep one of the assistants that's already presently at Mississippi State. I can't remember if it was the hitting specialist or the pitching specialist, but yeah, you mentioned Kyle Bunn, who of course was an assistant at Clemson from 08 to 09, and like you said, was underneath Lemonis in Indiana. But the only thing that I would say, and this is not to disparage anything about Coach Lemonis, is the fact that what more did Gary Henderson have to show you to at least prove to you that he could do the job and do the job well and stabilize the situation about as well as anybody could, getting you to the Final Four of the college baseball season and still not get the job?
That's tough.
Just not give up those 5 runs with 2 out on Saturday night.
That's not his fault, though.
No, I know. I'm just kidding.
He did a great job. I mean, to spend, like 3 games into the season or something to take over a tough situation. And it didn't have a great, they got hot at the right time. They didn't have a great regular season. As we've noted here before, they were 500 in SEC play, but they got hot when it counted the most. And they made a terrific run with this thing. So, but you're an athletic director, and you have to make a business decision, not an emotional decision. Emotional decisions get you into trouble sometimes. And he decided to go get a guy who is regarded as a great recruiter, number one. When Lemonis and when the guy who was at Louisville were both at the Citadel.
Yeah.
Ray Tanner used to say going up against those guys in recruiting, because he had to face those guys in recruiting.
He just got a raise, by the way, the Louisville guy.
Yeah, McConnell.
Yes.
He said, those guys are unbelievable recruiters at the Citadel. I'm going and the Citadel, as good as they've always been, I mean, they usually get, in the state of South Carolina in particular, they get the guys at Clemson and South Carolina kind of go through and maybe pass on for the most part. But he said he also knew if those 2 guys were recruiting a player that's a good player, and he had to go look at him himself and make sure that's they didn't let one fall through the cracks there and end up at the Citadel when they might want him at South Carolina.
Well, I think Mississippi State's athletic director had decided that, a good solid nucleus of their players were leaving. It may be a chance now to start at square one. And in my looking at this situation, he didn't try to hide that they weren't going after a new coach, because he could have let this thing drag. Hey, Lemonis, could you wait another week and then we had a search? He had this guy. in mind all along, because
Right.
he surely didn't wait too long to announce the hire, because Lamona seems like, as you say, Corn, the guy that wants to hit the ground running. He probably told him, look, if you're going to hire me on Monday after the World Series, if y'all not in it, and so I can get recruiting started.
Yeah, the guy who they are going to keep on staff is hitting coach and recruiting coordinator Jake Gautreaux. He is somebody who will at least be a holdover from the previous staff under Gary Henderson and again under the previous administration there with the Bulldogs. That was first reported by D1Baseball.com's Kendall Rogers. But that stands to reason, Corn, that he could bring Bun with him and pardon the pun, stick him right in the oven.
Yeah, that's exactly what he'd be doing. Let's talk about tonight's championship opener, assuming, and I'm seeing pictures from Aaron Fitt and others there. It's like a beautiful day in Omaha.
Yes, sunshine delay. I told you.
Is there lightning off in the distance?
Got to be, yes.
So
They
anyway,
showed the radar with a passing front going through Omaha.
so they'll get to it. But boy, Heimlich is it's a mystery how poorly he has performed in his 2 starts in Omaha. I mean, he hasn't gotten past, I don't think he's gotten out of the 4th inning, has he, in either of his starts?
No, he is not.
And I mean, this was a guy that was practically unhittable the last 2 years. And Oregon State. They played good teams. He's faced really good competition. We'll see what he does tonight because, of course, he went undrafted for the reasons that we've talked about. And you wonder how these 2 outings are affecting how the general managers and the scouts are feeling about him as a pitcher.
Yeah, the only feeling I can think of when I look at Heimlich and what has happened is I can only think of one pitcher who can be dominant, but he has to be dominant with guile. And if hitters are dialed in, you can get to him. And I'm talking about Greg Maddux. Remember Greg Maddux regular season versus Greg Maddux postseason. Pitchers who get too much of the plate and they have to deal with guile. And this guy has to do that. And Heimlich has gotten too much of that plate and he's got hurt on it because guys are adjusting to his off-speed stuff. And I think he doesn't use his fastball enough, even though his fastball is not dominant. Sometimes you throw a lot of off-speed stuff, he can seem quicker than it normally is. So I think that's one of the difficult things about it is I think they're dialed in on him right now.
The thing about Heimlich is the fact that they're in Omaha right now at the College World Series. One of the rumored suitors for him, at least as an undrafted free agent, it wouldn't have to go very, very far, and that is the Kansas City Royals. That could be one of the suitors, and I see a lot just because of my previous stops in the journalism world of people who are Royals fans who vehemently object, I guess would be the proper way to say that, to the signing of Luke Heimlich. This is from one of the people who I follow. He says, how will parents with kids the same age as the child Heimlich pled guilty to allegedly assaulting explain to them why he's pitching for Kansas City? Please do not sign Heimlich. He can get his second chance doing community service among adults. And again, not to re-adjudicate the case, which has been at least done so in the court of public opinion. And like we've said over the course of the time, like with this, I wouldn't want it to be my organization looking at signing him.
Well, my only feeling is that
you never want to be first in the pool with something like that.
Yeah, but you know what? You can't expect a guy, and I know what he of course, he says he didn't do it, and we all, if you go back and read his story, then you know why he admitted to it, and now he says he didn't do it. Whatever the case may be there, the guy still has to live. I mean, guy still has to make a living at his craft, and you just somebody's going to give him a chance to pitch, and somebody, the guy has had to turn a deaf ear all these years to the fans and to the media ever since this became public a couple of years ago, and he's done a nice job in his hometown there in Oregon where he pitches of doing just that because his record has been sparkling up to this point. But I mean, if a guy has gone through the entire process of the punishment, he's paid his dues to society based on what the legal system said he had to do, and by all accounts, he's been a model citizen. You got to give him a chance to continue his life somewhere. And he was only
15.
I still think you got to prove yourself.
But I mean, that's what the rehab's supposed to be all about, is to be able to return you to society.
Recruiting when we come back.
The guys are always checking email. Send your comments or questions to talkback@sportstalksc.com. Now, more of Sports Talk from Columbia's Main Street.
Welcome back, Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Did want to at least pass along this other baseball note. Adam Hill has signed his deal with the New York Mets right around his slot value, $507,000. Of course, we brought you the news of Rich Chapman coming back, as well as Graham Lawson coming back from South Carolina. Those are the two guys who have drafted with eligibility to return for USC. They could possibly come back. Still two eligible to return players who have yet to sign their deals. Carlos Cortez with the Mets, LT Tolbert with Diamondbacks. They have until the end of, I believe, next week, the 6th of July, to make that happen. So that could be an interesting little situation here, Corn, because Mets are running out of slot money with Cortez, number one, and number two, LT Tolbert. It's weird somebody his exact same position, who was also a South Carolina signee, and Blaze Alexander has already signed his deal. LT, I'm sure, is trying to figure out, where he fits in that organization.
Listen, if you're Mark Kingston, man, you just sort of sit back and cross your fingers and hope.
Right.
Because imagine if those two guys were to come back and be in your lineup next year. As we look at South Carolina for next year with the lineup that they can run out there and with the guys that are coming in this recruiting class, I think you definitely have to consider, and I'll be very liberal with this, I think you have to consider South Carolina a top 25 team.
Sure.
To open up the season.
Absolutely.
They got to within a win of Omaha, and they've got enough coming back core players. You got to replace your catcher, but maybe Chris Cullen will get back to the level expected of him, or maybe he'll move to another position. They do have a young catcher coming in.
The JUCO guy coming in, I believe.
They got to fill the void at third base. They got to fill maybe the void at shortstop. Certainly got to fill the void at second. They got to fill the void at first. That's a lot of voids to fill.
They've got voids.
Yeah.
But
and they lose some pitching.
Yeah.
But I like the people they got coming in, and I like – listen, they could have if Cortez comes back, they could have their entire starting outfield back, plus – the guys that they're bringing in. This junior college hitter is supposed to be really, really good. They have a junior college shortstop coming in who's supposed to be good.
Lawson and Rich Chapman coming back will really at least kind of stabilize the bullpen along with Sawyer Bridges. And, whether or not you put Logan in the rotation right away with Majinski, maybe Gilreath, or, again, one of the guys who comes in as a JUCO or a freshman, they've already proven to you that they know what the heck they're doing when it comes to putting together a lineup and a roster. Now, the one thing you do have to do is you have to stop the midweek losses. That's the one thing you have to do. Because while their margin for error was small after the first 37 games of the season, I think it'll probably be just as small over the balance of the 2018-19 season.
I think that's what the Get Acquainted session was about. I think they did a lot of experimentation in those midweek games, especially early.
Right.
And that will cause you to lose games. They don't have to do that now. They know their team. The 1 year, honeymoon is over. And they got a good idea of what they have coming back and what they need to do going forward.
We hope you enjoy what we did Friday with outgoing Clemson assistant AD for football communications, Tim Beret. That was a fun time to at least talk to somebody, again, probably the foremost Clemson authority. The person who will be assuming his role is a man by the name of Ross Taylor. Clemson has announced this today. He was a 7-year media relations assistant with the Washington Redskins. He also served the last 3 seasons as director of communications. And while this is something that probably only makes sense or really is cared about by us, he will be the person who at least becomes the point of contact for when we get the kind of access to Clemson football. And I do also want to add the simple fact that he is a 2010 graduate of the University of Missouri.
Well, that's a mark against him.
Oh, shut up. Shut up,
loser!
And independent of what you want to say about the
one
football
tiger
and
to another tiger.
I hear he's very close friends with the athletics director at the University of Missouri and shares some of the same philosophies.
He is not. He doesn't know him from Adam, just like I don't either. And I've also told you that I don't particularly agree with what that gentleman has to say. He should not be named. But Ross Taylor is the gentleman's name. And again, like I said, he comes very highly recommended. And Tim Beret had some nice things to say about him in the staff release as well. He was involved in the hiring process. And so anytime you get somebody from Clemson now, it'll be thanks to that guy.
Yeah, yeah. We'll see what he does. I mean, look, when you come in and you take over, you want to do things your way. You want to do things in your style. For all these years, and again, this really doesn't interest the people who aren't in the media who cover Clemson. I mean, fans. Then again, you know, now fans get their hands on game notes
right
via the websites. Used to be just strictly for the media. Now they make them available to everybody.
Right.
But that style, if you look at Clemson's game notes, that style was started by Bob Bradley that Clemson uses. And of course, Tim put his little twist to it, but basically he kept the same style, very simple, not flamboyant, but filled with as much information as they could give you. And you know, that was their mission, was to help the media. But unfortunately, and we'll see how Ross is, there are no more. I'm not going to say there aren't any, but you know, schools are now doing away with the name sports information, and they're going with athletic communications. And in large part, athletic communications works not with the media, but in competition. Don't want to say against, but I'll just say in competition.
Yes.
They want to be the ones. And Dan Radakovich made it clear a couple of years ago in a tweet to a note to his fans. He wants Clemson fans to get their news first from ClemsonTigers.com. And that's impossible unless you tell your coaches to quit leaking information to your fan websites and insiders. But see, that's a double-edged sword, because, you know, big boosters are members of those websites, and they want to give information and they want to get information. And as long as those websites continue to pump out the positive stuff, they're not going to interrupt that flow of information.
And here's the thing. If a lot of that stuff is positively driven, guess what happens when you cut off the access?
They get pissed.
The stories start turning negative. That's
the
way
they'll start turning negative when you start losing.
Well, Tim,
they're like anybody else.
Tim talked about it on Friday about, you know, you develop relationships with people, you're cordial with them, you're professional. But nowadays, you know, with the instantaneous communication, the Twitter and whatever, it's almost impossible to do that now.
You have recruiting.
Yes, a lot of notes from over the weekend, offers and the like, and some decisions being made. USC offered athlete Trayvon Moss, 6 feet 205. He's out of Tulsa. Oregon State, Louisville, Tennessee, Virginia, Washington State, some other offers. Gamecocks also offered 2021 defensive back James Williams, 6'3", 200, Opelika, Florida. He currently is a Miami commitment. 2020 receiver Jalen Hyatt of Dutch Fork has offers from Virginia Tech and Duke that he earned from his performance at their camps. The Hokies are standing out the most with him right now. He plans a return trip to Blacksburg July 29th. Also camped at USC and Clemson. Both remain interested, plan to scout him this summer. He's also hearing from Wake Forest. He's been contacted by Virginia. Dutch Fork offensive lineman Cameron Stewart committed to Coastal Carolina. One-time USC and Clemson target receiver Jashawn Sheffield committed to Auburn. USC target Curtis Fan committed to Florida State. Heard a bunch of those crystal balls go crack on that one because, you know, the Gamecock insiders had him going to USC. Receiver Daryl Harding, who had a USC offer but not a strong push from the Gamecocks, committed to Duke. Defensive back DJ Turner, Sewanee, Georgia, who had USC and Clemson offers, committed to Michigan. Clemson did not make the cut with defensive end David Ojabo, Blairstown, New Jersey.
Wasn't all in.
Took his list from 15 to 5. Michigan, Texas A&M, Penn State, Notre Dame, and Ohio State are on that list. Basketball, per his coach, Clemson offered 2019 6'4" Armand Franklin of Indianapolis. He was at Clemson on a visit Sunday, 23-8 last season. Per his AAU coach, USC offered 2019 6'8" Patrick Williams of Charlotte, also has a Clemson offer. USC also offered 6-foot point guard, 2019 class Giovanni Santiago, who has reclassified to 19 and will attend Hargrave Military Prep. USC also offered 6-foot point guard Miles Tate of Dorman and 6'1" Trey Jackson in the 2019 class of Blythewood was offered by Charlotte. Tate, by the way, is in the 2020 class.
That's recruiting. Look at it on our website and also on Twitter at SportsTalkSC. Use the hashtag STRecruiting.
2 of Sports Talk up next with your hosts Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. Don't leave us hanging. Join the show, 800-956-7266.
Welcome back, Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network on this Monday, the 25th day of June, 2018, along with Phil Kornblut, Professor Tom Hayes, yours truly, Will Pelagic, here in our second hour. We'll continue to start looking towards the fall, ACC, SEC outlook, and also look at the recruiting boards for both USC and Clemson here in this hour as well. Clemson, according to CBS Sports, has the 4th best quarterback room. That's despite the defections of Zarek Cooper, as well as Tucker Israel, as well as Hunter Johnson, with the 3 that are still remaining: Trevor Lawrence, Kelly Bryant, Chase Bryce. And this was the write-up from them. Regardless of whether Trevor Lawrence is starting against Furman on September the 1st, here's betting he'll be starting by the time Clemson is playing in the college football playoff. Clemson has the former #1 player in the country for 3 more seasons, and Bryce and Bryant will serve as solid number 2s along the way. So people who have nothing to do with Clemson have already conceded the starting job to the Hare.
Who is the 3 above Clemson?
The 3 above Clemson are Washington, who, of course, under quarterback coach Bush Hamdan, who, among other things, was a high school opponent of yours truly in a high school football game at O'Connell High School. They have Jake Browning, Jacob Eason, who was eligible in 2019 after transferring from Georgia. Alabama, which has the similar situation that Clemson has with Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts battling it out for the starting job there. And Penn State, who has Trace McSorley coming back and is a potential Heisman Trophy candidate a year going into the year this year. Number 5 is Georgia with Jake Fromm and, of course, the incoming freshman Justin Fields.
Well, that's an interesting take by those people. You know, Kelly Bryant posted some excellent numbers last year, won an ACC championship, got Clemson to the national semifinals, and did a lot of great things. So that's a start. You throw in the #1 high school quarterback recruit in the country, who is getting, you know, a tremendous amount of attention. And then you've got Chase Bryce waiting in the wings as well, who was also a very heavily recruited player. So those are 3 big-time quarterbacks, each of whom could be starting, if they were at different schools, could be starting for that school. So I think you can make a very strong argument for that. So, yeah, I wouldn't throw shade on that. I would agree that Clemson's got a lot of positions that are among the best in the country. You take that group, you take the defensive line group, obviously the best in the country. You take the wide receivers as a group, probably in the top 2 or 3.
Offensive line
in the country. Offensive line.
They probably have the best offensive lineman that's NFL ready in Mitch Hyatt.
Yeah.
But I don't know about the rest of the group there.
Well, everybody has played a lot on their offensive line.
Right.
They got to replace the right guard. They're going to do that with John Simpson, and he's obviously was a very heavily recruited player out of the Charleston area.
You wonder about right tackle, the revolving door there with Pollard and the like there.
Well, but Pollard's played a lot of football for him. The point is everybody up there has played a lot of football for them, so you have to like them. I don't know that you would say that they are, you know, maybe top 5, but maybe top 10 for sure.
Yeah, the difficult thing about me judging Clemson's offensive line is the fact they normally operate out of the spread and they get rid of the ball quickly. They don't put a lot of pressure on their quarterbacks with 5- and 7-step drops that, you know, can really expose your tackles if they have any weaknesses.
Some of the other notable names that are on this list: 6, Michigan, of course, with the transfer of Shea Patterson. Mississippi State has, of course, Nick Fitzgerald coming back in the 8th spot there. Florida State with the return of DeAndre Francois and, of course, James Blackman involved there. Auburn is at 13 with Jarrett Stidham. Also a couple of rising players in Malik Willis and Joey Gatewood. NC State with Ryan Finley. They have a couple of freshmen that will duke it out, redshirt freshmen Matt McKay and Devin Leary, who will be there at 14. Duke, one of Clemson's opponents upcoming this year. Of course, the returning starter Daniel Jones, who has 2 years of eligibility, but, of course, he could be possibly springboarded according according to what David Shoemate told us earlier this year, that he could have a draft-eligible season. Jordan Ta'amu of Ole Miss is part of the number 21 best quarterback room. Number 22 was LSU. Missouri, with Drew Lock coming back for his senior season, is 24th. No, there is not a South Carolina sighting on this roster.
Dan Mullen being at Florida, that could weaken Mississippi State's quarterback room. Not having the quarterback
but their new coach has a great reputation.
Oh, yes.
Offensive mind and developing quarterbacks. I say this about Jake Bentley. I mean, how long was that list that you mentioned?
25 long.
And no Jake Bentley?
Mm-mm.
Well, then that's not a legitimate list then. He's got to be in the top 25.
Well, I think it's about the rooms. It's about what's around him. And I think that's
who else is around Nick Fitzgerald? Who else is around? I'll give you Florida State because, those two quarterbacks have played a lot. Blackman came in, did a decent job for them. Who else is with the Mississippi guy now that
they've got a sophomore named Katayan Thompson, who is a big athletic guy, according to this article, and Jalen Maiden, who's coming in as an incoming freshman. They also mentioned a 2019 commit, Garrett Schrader, who might be the most big athletic quarterback in his class. He, of course, in the same recruiting class as Ryan Helinski, getting a lot of the same plaudits that Helinski is.
Right. Well, I think, South Carolina's quarterback room, when you've got the veteran in Bentley now going into basically his third year as a starter, you got an Elite 11 freshman into Kerryon Joyner. That should be worth something. Now, the other two, Jay Urich and Michael Scarnecchia, of course, they haven't played at all.
I think that's the part of Clemson's, or at least the part of South Carolina's situation that I think is a bit of a problem. We haven't seen the representative numbers from Bentley. We're going off of potential, and we're going off of the group he has coming around him waiting in 2018. And the other part of that too is much of his backups basically unproven. You could argue the same thing for Clemson, yet if there's anybody who has benefited from enough unseen hype than anybody, and that's Trevor Lawrence. That's the thing. That's the thing that I don't understand. And I'm reticent. I know that everybody's saying all the nice things in the world about Trevor Lawrence and his ability, and he can walk on water and do all this stuff. We have yet to see how he reacts to being in a college uniform against guys who can hit him. That's the only thing that I'm worried about.
That'll be interesting. And I still say, when you talk about a quarterback room, I want to know who else is in that room.
Right.
If anything, Dan Werner in the room
should
strengthens South Carolina's quarterback room.
Well, I'm not going to sell Trevor Lawrence short at all because his high school career screams loudly about what he can do. And then having enrolled at Clemson in January, having gone through the winter program, having gone through all the preparation for spring ball, having now the opportunity to work with everybody in the summer, I'm not going to sell this guy short. I mean, Clemson is usually right on with picking out. I mean, look at the quarterbacks they have been able to sign, even though several of them didn't stick. I mean, Zarek Cooper was a heavily recruited quarterback. Hunter Johnson was an Elite 11 quarterback. Tucker Israel was a reach. Even though he broke Tim Tebow's passing records in Florida, I mean, he just wasn't going to be a player at Clemson. Chase Bryce was the best quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks in Georgia when he committed. They are able to identify quarterbacks, recruit them, and get the ones they want. So what I'm saying is they believe this cat's pretty good, and I'm going to, ride that belief as well. I'm not going to sell him short. He's got all the tangibles, and apparently reading up some of the stuff from up there on him, the intangibles. He's not fazed by this freshman thing and how he's going to do under fire for the first time. Mm-hmm. They all think he's going to handle it well. Now, if he gets out there against Texas A&M and they start throwing some screwy defenses and coverages at him and he can't figure it out and he makes freshman mistakes if he's out there, then you reassess. But there's, right now there's no reason to think that's going to be the case.
Far be it from me to equate to Kerryon Joyner and Trevor Lawrence, but how is their quarterback room anything different than what USC's quarterback room looks like from the standpoint of, other than the fact that Trevor Lawrence comes in with a significant amount more of hype?
Well, and Chase Bryce too, even though he hasn't played very much. I mean, they've got three guys that are very highly recruited.
You only put one of them on the field at the time.
Right. And listen, Joyner, I mean, we all know that Joyner has got a little hitch in his passing form. He is not at this point considered to be a terrific passer, but there are things, if they incorporate him into a package in the offense, that he can do well if they give him a chance.
Just thinking critically. That's all I'm doing. That's all I'm doing. We'll come back. We'll do some more and start to look ahead to 2018 from the football standpoint for the SEC and ACC, and also one recruiting note involving a USC target.
This is the place to talk Tigers, Gamecocks, and more. Sports talk across the state on the South Carolina Radio Network.
Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. We're brought to you by Founders Federal Credit Union. This is big. For a limited time, Founders Federal Credit Union's 5-year certificate is at its highest rate. Don't miss your chance. Visit foundersfcu.com or one of your local Founders Federal Credit Union offices to apply. Am I to answer correctly that your Uber experience on your last weekend trip to Chicago was better than it was in New York?
Yeah, I've done well last couple of times with Uber, both in Philadelphia and Chicago. I think I've got it down now. You know, it's just a matter of
getting. It's not difficult.
No. I just had a bad experience in New York trying to get it done.
You did it the one wrong place that you were not supposed to use Uber.
Yeah,
you use this thing, the hand.
It's not a good place to start using Uber for the first time. In fact, I'm standing on the streets of New York, and I had to call our news director in Jeff City, Ashley Bird, to ask her how to complete the process, because I didn't complete the process
of the catch.
Yeah. Well, what happened was I really didn't complete the process, and I never did get a driver confirmed.
Right.
But all these different cars were pulling up to the hotel, Uber drivers, and I stick my head in the door thinking it was my driver, and they were, no, we're looking for Alice. No, we're looking for Joey, or whatever the case may be. So, but I got it down now. Piece of cake.
If you were lying.
You know, when I leaned my head in, we were looking for Alice. I'm Alice. All right.
They just call me Al.
I saw that. I saw two girls get in a fight over an Uber at a concert once.
It's crazy.
It's like literally legit, almost like slapping.
But the drivers in Chicago that I happen to ride with, most of them are professional Uber drivers.
Yes.
That's all they do.
Yes.
They make a great living. One guy said this is all he does. His wife is a police officer in Chicago, and this allows him to have freedom of hours.
In a big city, you can make a very nice living.
Yeah, that's all he does.
And the thing about it is a lot of these guys are either retired cab drivers or independent cab drivers, and they turned it into a thing. I'm not trying to create a big, huge ad for Uber, but I felt like that was a nice little fun thing to throw around. So the SEC, again, we were talking about this last week. I know you love Dan Mullen, and you love what he did at Mississippi State. I don't know if that love transfers into them leapfrogging South Carolina to be the #1 contender for Georgia in the SEC East. I look over there and I see the same garbage at quarterback that I saw last year, and I'm not convinced that garbage is going to turn into fruition.
Garbage in, garbage out.
One man's trash is another man's treasure.
Dan Mullen is a great coach, and he's going to reinstall his system that he ran under Urban Meyer. Of course, he had some terrific quarterbacks to operate that when he was at Florida, and probably in time he's going to get there. But like you said last time we talked about Florida, Felipe Frank's not going to put the fear into anybody at quarterback.
No. They'll probably have a different type of package for him. Dan Mullen seems to me contours his offense to the comfort level of the quarterback he has, and that would be interesting to see if he's able to pull that off. Or could we ask the question that Dan Mullen is the type of football coach like Muschamp, and they're comfortable when they're in a situation where they're the perpetual underdog versus taking the big job at Florida?
Well, you look at their schedule. They open up with Charleston Southern. Then they get Kentucky in Gainesville. Then they get Colorado State in Gainesville. So their first 3 games are home. That Kentucky game will be interesting to see how far Kentucky has come, and a little bit about what Florida's got. They go to Tennessee on the 22nd. I mean, again, Tennessee doesn't put fear into anybody. Mississippi State, they go down there. That'll be interesting for Dan Mullen.
Tennessee is interesting from only the standpoint of that's the 2 noobs in the East going against each other, Pruitt versus Mullen. I'm not necessarily noobs as far as just new faces, new places. Mullen's obviously done this elsewhere. This will be the first real rivalry game for Jeremy Pruitt.
You know, they do return off of last year's team 19 starters.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they got most everybody back on offense. They got 9 back on defense. Look at their offensive starters returning. Martez Ivy. They returned their entire starting offensive line. So that's a good place to start.
You return a whole team that went 4-7.
But you know, I give you that. But they picked up experience, and you know Florida's recruited well. P. Ryan is back at running back. He's not bad. Malik Davis has been pretty good at running back. You know, their receivers are decent. Freddie Swain, Josh Hammond, Kadarius Toney's a guy that USC or Clemson, one of them recruited, as I recall. So you have to when I see a team returning all of its starters on the offensive line, though, to me that's a bonus.
Right.
I think that's a big positive for
They have stability now too. Let's remember right when the season started, that coaching staff, everything, it looked like they were about to implode.
Right.
And that carries to the players. We saw the Florida team that came here to South Carolina just totally look disorganized. Like they were just wanted to get the season over with. I think now they feel they have some stability, and that makes them dangerous.
I don't like their road schedule. At Tennessee, at Mississippi State, at Vanderbilt, and of course at Florida State in the rivalry game. I would find it hard pressed if they won no more than one of those games.
Oh, I think they could do. I mean, the only one that would be fearful, Mississippi State, I think is going to be really good. A healthy Nick Fitzgerald just makes them dangerous as all get outs, and you got to go down there. And it's going to be like Dan Mullen. They'd never heard of you at Mississippi. The cowbells will be ringing in his ears.
Right.
He'll be taking. He won't be able to sleep for 3. He may put earplugs in, because it's going to be so loud. Vandy, that doesn't scare you. I don't think Tennessee scares you. Of course, Florida State.
Vandy on the road.
Who's their 4th SEC road game?
They don't have one. They have it counts as the Florida-Georgia game. That's right. They're the road team in that neutral site contest.
Yeah, that's right.
Which I hate, by the way. I hate that they basically get Jones instead of a true road game because of the fact that they have a neutral site contest. I've never liked that.
Yeah, but let's don't kill the tradition.
Yeah,
I like the tradition, but I also think that they should also play a 4th road game.
But
they're only going to get to play 3 home games. Yeah, they're not going to do that.
And Dan Mullen could really endear himself to the Gator faithful if they could steal a win against Florida State, because Florida State has owned them
800
in the last few years.
800-956-7266 is the phone number. Let's go to Mark, who's calling in Aiken. Mark, what's up here on Sports Talk?
Hey, guys. Always a pleasure to talk with you. Got a question regarding college baseball and minor league. Now, I know you guys have been to many more games than I have, but I wanted to ask you this question. I was at a minor league game Saturday evening.
In North Augusta?
And yes, I was. I was there. And I was watching Augusta play. And they pulled their pitcher after 7 innings who was throwing a no-hitter. And it struck me as odd because I'm wondering, is that commonplace in college and minor league to do that?
Yes.
But I'm thinking if you're trying to make it up the rung of a ladder, that would look very good on your resume.
Doesn't matter.
Scouts or sorry, it doesn't matter. So they're going to pull.
Those pitch counts are from having worked at the minor league level and of course watching college baseball. The pitch counts are strict. And by strict I mean if somebody has their limit in a particular at bat, they'll be pulled in the middle of that at bat. Those pitch limits are hard and fast, and they come from above. They don't care if you're throwing a no hitter. They don't care if you're throwing a shutout. If you are at your limit, you are at your limit.
Yeah, just remember the minor leagues, they are about nothing but development.
Yes.
I mean, they don't care less if your team wins 162, they play about 147 games.
140.
Yeah, so win them all or lose them all. It's about player development in the minor leagues, and the players are the same way. I mean, yeah, when you make the playoffs, they want to go ahead and win the championship, but they're interested in moving up the ladder as quickly as possible.
And, of course, the manager gets a call when they have their little conference calls. They won't be congratulating him on the pitcher having a no-hitter. They'll ask, why did you let him throw so many pitches in that ball game?
And the manager does not fill out the lineup card. The scouting director or field director.
Is that right?
The manager doesn't fill out the lineup card.
I didn't know that. For minor league games?
Absolutely.
Huh.
That's filled out by people who are a higher pay grade than him.
You finally educated me on something. That's good.
Finally.
Good start to the week.
I make you come into knowledge on certain things.
Y'all ain't got nobody.
So we're dealing with the rain delay in the College World Series. If you haven't been paying attention to anything involving our state, you know the president's in town also. And apparently he's under a rain delay as well.
Does that mean they haven't been able to land, or they're not taking him out of the plane, or what's the deal?
I have no idea. Probably didn't want his hair to get wet.
Probably not. That wouldn't be attractive.
I'm not going there.
Well, I've seen,
I'm not going there.
When he's sweating, you see what it looks like. So you can imagine what it looks like when it's dumped on with the rain.
I'm not going
anyway,
there.
I have a couple more recruiting items.
I like my job.
I want to pass along here real quick.
Stop.
USC target defensive back DJ Daniel out of Georgia Military was offered by Alabama. He continues to get big-time offers. Myrtle Beach offensive lineman Evan Jumper committed to Furman. And South Carolina is waiting on word for them, they hope, of a commitment from the wide receiver in Memphis, Trevion. No, wait a minute. Trevon, no, wait a minute. What's his name? Got to look it up because I have.
You've lost it?
I've had a brain snafu here. Kevion, there we go.
Yes,
Kevion Mullins.
Kevion Mullins, yes.
Yeah, Kevion Mullins, who had said he was going to announce Wednesday at a Rivals function in Atlanta. Gamecock Central reported that, from what they were hearing, of course, they're part of the Rivals network. Rivals was going to handle his commitment. What they were hearing is that he may not announce this week. He may delay it for a little while. I've reached out to him and have not heard back from him, trying to confirm what his plans are. So if we get confirmation on that before the night's over, we'll pass it along.
Everything that guy tweets is Gamecock. I have to think that he is got to be as much a USC lean as anybody. And he's tweeting at Gamecock recruits. He's tweeting at Ryan Helinski. He's basically typed out the first 4 letters of Spurs Up in Will Muschamp's Twitter account.
Yeah, he's told us that South Carolina was his big leader over Memphis. The one thing that would prevent him from going to South Carolina would be the heartstring pull,
the lure of home,
of staying home, and that sort of thing. And that can play on a guy's decision. But the family is thinking about it and talking about it, and we'll see what happens. Also, of course, you've got A.J. Lawson from a basketball standpoint now working on his decision with South Carolina, Tulane, and Creighton, his 3 finalists. This looked like a no-brainer for a while because, his dad is from South Carolina, from Somerton, and went to Fort Jackson, lived in Columbia, has strong ties to South Carolina, though he's been away for about 25 years up in Canada.
I thought he went to the Air Force, Shaw,
I'm sorry,
yes.
lived in Columbia, went to Shaw. Yeah. So, but he has connections to the state. He's got family in the state. But he went to Creighton to visit, and he went to Tulane to visit, and apparently he's trying to sort it out between those 3.
One would think that you should be able to out recruit those 2.
When I saw his list, and I agree with you, I thought the biggest threat to South Carolina when I looked at it as far as was one of their fellow Final Four members, and that was Oregon. I say he goes out Oregon, he may like it out there. He said
he might stay.
You say that, but listen, Creighton has a very reputable basketball program,
and they played
in a beautiful arena,
a basketball-specific conference.
Right,
Big East,
and they're in a town that is crazy about the basketball program, supports it heavily, and they play in a very offensive style, right? Now and then you say Tulane. Well, look, Mike Dunleavy, has a great reputation. They have a beautiful new arena at Tulane as well. They don't have much of a recent history of success. Maybe he looks at that as an opportunity to step right in and be the man.
Well, then I ask you this, because, again, we hear this all the time. We heard this last week. We talked about this earlier when it comes to South Carolina capitalizing on its Final Four run. Did they undo all of that goodwill in one fell swoop by the year they had this past year?
No.
Why is that?
Because
tell me why not.
Because kids from a few years ago who saw the Final Four run, they're still in high school. They'll make the decision. This guy got to a Final Four. We can get there. My point is, when people look at things now, we're in a microwave society, and people want instant gratification.
Are you getting that at Creighton?
But sometimes the best things you have is when people it gets into their memory that, hey, this guy did it. They did it. They went to five, and they just saw the atmosphere in Columbia. Then you have to get them on campus, because some kids like a kind of a story campus. Others like to be in a city setting. It just depends.
I'd say the evidence is overwhelmingly against what you're saying. Just look at the most recent class that you could have sold on the Final Four trip in the state of South Carolina. Every one of them went somewhere else.
But that's because they
Zion
probably made their
Williamson
decision beforehand.
DJ.
No. Zion Williamson, DJ Burns, Jimmy Nichols from Conway, Neesmith from Porter Gal.
They didn't even look at Nichols.
Who?
South Carolina.
They offered him.
They offered
He offered, and he took an official visit. So they missed on all those guys.
We never heard him mentioned, though.
No, but
we did.
I remember him mentioned as covering his recruiting, but I don't remember seeing South Carolina ever considered a serious suitor.
Yeah, but see, this is
took
why
an official. And
this is why I say that
they were in his last three. It was Providence, South Carolina, and
this is why I say the long-term evidence proves I'm right, because Zion Williamson from the start, when he began, Duke was my dream school. But then everybody else started jumping. Man, Clemson's got a chance now. So and so. I said, that clown going to Duke. Never mentioned Duke. Then when it was time to mention what school he was going to, went right back to his first.
Well, you made a lucky hunch. Congratulations.
No,
give him some props, because he was on an island there.
He made a lucky guess, and I'm giving him his due on that.
It was more than a lucky guess.
Right up to the end there, his people were telling Brad Brownell and the Clemson people he was going to Clemson.
That's to make him happy.
Talk is cheap, you know.
That's to make him happy.
I don't know. I think that I think South Carolina, recruiting wise, got zippity doodah day out of their Final Four trip,
and that's what I think.
And we'll see what happens with this very talented 2019 class. If they don't, now they've already got Trey Hannibal committed, and that's a good start.
Yes,
but you need to land Juwan Gary, you need to land Josiah James, in particular, those two guys, because you've recruited them extensively.
But suppose they land somebody from somewhere else who's just as good or better.
That's the thing.
Well, I mean, James is pretty damn good.
That's the other part of this too that I want to at least make sure, because again, we talked about this in reference to some of the football guys as well. Does it pay to lock down your borders? Again, it's not like these guys are going elsewhere and having a lot of success. We've talked about, Seventh Woods is basically still riding the bench at North Carolina.
Had some injuries.
The other guy whose name is escaping me, Jalik Felton, didn't stick.
Had some issues.
Yes, had some issues. So I mean, again, it's not as if these guys are going elsewhere and turning into All-Americans.
Look, if you're South Carolina basketball and you've got top 50 recruits in your state, by and large, those are going to be, and the same for Clemson, those are going to be your best opportunities to get the top 50 player. For example,
that's always the case,
South Carolina is going to get a visit from Wendell Moore out of North Carolina.
Yes.
Okay, look, he's not coming to South Carolina. Don't fool yourself, because he's got North Carolina, Duke, NC State. He's not going to leave the state of North Carolina in all likelihood. Yes, it's nice to get a visit, and it's nice to have your name mingled with him, but you're not going to get him. We see that all the time, that sort of toying with these out-of-state top 50 players that might take a visit, but they end up going to one of the blue blood programs.
Not everybody always wants to stay inside their home state. People want to go out and branch out.
There's not very many top players in North Carolina. Dominique an exception. I know Pro's going to mention Dominique Wilkins.
Yeah.
Dominique an exception, okay? There aren't very many out of North Carolina who leave the state.
Dominique knew about the degrees at North Carolina before they did. That's why he went to Georgia.
Wow.
Well, he could have gotten one easier at North Carolina if he'd have just gone there.
That's what I'm saying. He knew that. So he went to Georgia.
You're saying he wanted a real degree?
Yeah. So he went to
Not that a Georgia degree is a real degree. I don't want to confuse the two.
Wow.
I'm not sure what's less valuable, a real degree from Georgia or one of North Carolina's fake degrees.
You sounded like people from Georgia Tech now.
Let's go to Bulldog Bert on line one.
Is his Georgia degree?
His ears are burning right now.
Is his Georgia degree printed on parchment or toilet paper? Which one is it?
Oh man,
I think it's the latter.
At least it didn't come from Latta, South Carolina.
True.
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. Did you see that the #1 overall pick out of Auburn, Casey Mize, signed his deal, the #1 overall pick in the Major League Baseball first-year player draft, $7.5 million before he even takes the mound, all in his pocket.
That's good money if you can get it.
Have you liked the way that they do that, by the way? Give you the signing bonus up front?
In terms of guaranteed money, yeah, I think that works okay. I mean, that's just the way it is. That's the way the agents have been able to work the situation in the player's favor.
It's a great way to blow all that money, though. That's the only thing I hate about it.
Well, I mean, like the money coach has said many times on the program in talking about these new millionaires, you got to be disciplined enough and have the people around you to be able to preserve your loot.
That's got to kill you with capital gains taxes, though. That's the other thing about that, too, I don't like, is that, not to get too businessy, but again, from that standpoint, you get that, and then over the next couple of years in your minor league baseball, you're basically making either around or less than minimum wage of the equivalent.
So as I look at my list of draftees that we've been following, so Jordan Adams signed, Seth Beer signed, Owen White signed, Adam Hill signed.
Taj Bradley signed.
Well, I'm getting down to that. Riley Gillum signed. I'm going in order of pick. Taj Bradley signed. Cody Morris from USC signed.
Correct.
Blaze Alexander signed. Evan Sisk, College of Charleston signed. Eddie DeMurias signed. And we know that
Lawson and Chapman, or Ridge Chapman.
Lawson and Chapman are coming back. So I'm not sure I've got everybody accounted for here. I'm sure some of these seniors probably have signed, like Chris Williams. Has he already signed?
Chris Williams, I've not seen anything.
8th round to the Twins.
I've not seen anything.
There's no reason for him. How about Madison Stokes? Has he signed his deal?
Stokes has not signed reportedly yet.
Yeah. So I mean, Kevin Woodall, has he signed?
Well, the thing about the seniors is they are not beholden to the July 6th deadline. They have until, I believe, the end of the year to sign.
You would think maybe you're trying to wrangle as much money out of them as you can, but you would think you'd want to get your pro career underway, get you some minor league ball under your belt, get to the rookie league so you can get that behind you, and then next year maybe be assigned, to a high single A or maybe even a double A if you do well in camp.
Yeah, they're saying with Adam Hill, he's going to start out either at short season Brooklyn or the rookie league in Kingsport. Those are both short season teams with the potential for him to graduate, if you will, to Class A Columbia. So he would be very much in the same vein as those here who at least saw him play in college. Cortez could have the same kind of deal.
I want to talk about South Carolina and Clemson recruiting as we've hit the dead period now,
right,
for football recruiting. Can I get a hallelujah from you, Brian?
Yes.
Thank you. The dead period is here, so that means, of course, most coaches are on vacation now. They finally get a chance to take a break, though I'm sure they're still texting and what else they're doing, Facebooking, everything else that they can do, but there can be no visits on campus, no in-person visits, any of that kind of stuff until it ends on July 24th. So I thought now would be a good time to kind of look at where South Carolina and Clemson happen to be with their recruiting boards, where they stand with their respective classes at this point. So why don't we do that as I take a look at what they've already accomplished to this point. Clemson sitting now on 18 commitments. They're going to sign a full class, of course. You look at the defensive back group, Joseph Charleston, Landon Zanders, Sheridan Jones, and Ray Thornton. They're still looking for a couple of more on the maybe another safety. They feel good about Jalen Phillips. Cornerback Andrew Booth, they feel good about him. Then you look at a couple of defensive ends in Ruki Horhoro and Logan Cash, defensive lineman interior, Taquan Johnson, 3 linebackers in Brian Constantine, Keith McGuire, and Greg Williams. Only 1 offensive lineman to date in Hunter Rayburn. You got to think that they need more. Want to sign a couple of more.
Yeah.
They took a punter on a full ride, Aiden Swanson, out of IMG Academy. The quarterback, Tayshawn Pumachan from up in Connecticut, highly recruited guy. 1 running back, Ches Malusi, 2 tight ends, Jalen Lay and Davis Allen. 2 receivers, Brandon Spector and Frank Ladson. So that's their take right now. What do you think?
It's interesting, you know, how much we were talking about South Carolina being ahead of Clemson in the 24/7 composite. I know you hate the rankings, but just from the composite standpoint, looking at all the rankings that are at least put up together, Clemson's now ranked number 4 in the country behind Alabama, A&M, LSU, and just ahead of Michigan. South Carolina is still in the top 15 there at 14. But it's funny how Clemson has kind of very quietly taken these guys who are not necessarily guys who are highly recruited nationally, but just guys who fit their mold of player. I think that's kind of where Dabo Swinney's looked at. And again, it's very much a selective situation now for where they're at.
You look at some of the guys left on Clemson's board who could or could not eventually be a Tiger. Ja'Kai Moore, offensive lineman out of Virginia, who's also a top USC target. Quavaris Crouch, linebacker, running back out of Charlotte, who's also a USC target.
The one thing that strikes me surprising is Clemson has gotten 18 commitments, but they've also lost a couple of battles. Like, that's the thing. You haven't seen them lose as many of these type of battles. So as they go in and get less selective with these offers, they've lost a couple battles.
I think they lose more battles than that, but they have a great machine that their battles are done under the wire rather than over the internet.
A couple of other guys, Cooper Dawson from Hanahan, who, of course, they offered as an offensive lineman. He's a defensive end, but they offered as an offensive lineman. Then he tore his ACL in their camp. Trayvon Walker, defensive lineman out of Thomaston, Georgia. They're still on the hunt there. Let's see who else we have on the list down here that they seem to be still looking at. Will Putnam, offensive lineman out of Tampa, would be another one to keep an eye on. Tell you, one of the surprising players in the state is Jacoby Pinckney from Dorman, who has narrowed his list to 4 schools, 4 big-time schools outside the state. He never got much of anything from South Carolina or Clemson. For whatever reason, they took their interest in wide receivers outside the state to other players. There is still Shaheem Battle for Clemson, a corner who's been favoring Clemson over NC State, so they're still there with him. Brendan Clark, the quarterback, they're still on him out of Virginia. He announces on July 4th, and right now he's coming off a visit to NC State, so not NC State, I'm sorry, a visit to Notre Dame. And so that could be a stiff competition there for the Tigers. Luke Griffin, offensive lineman out of Georgia, is another one. Noah Kane, a running back from IMG who visited Clemson, could be another one. Perhaps Joe. Now, do we pronounce this? You pronounced it the other day. Is it the N is silent? We pronounce it Gata?
Nada.
Oh, Nada. The G is silent.
Like Haloti Nada.
Joe Nada from Folsom, California. Tyler Davis, defensive lineman out of Apopka, Florida. Jake Cornybrook, offensive lineman out of Malvern, Pennsylvania.
Same place as Keith McGuire?
Yes, exactly. Teammate. So they like those guys. Also, Vonta Bentley, linebacker out of Alabama. Let me do the Gamecocks real quick.
15 commits?
For South Carolina? Yeah. So they have defensive ends, Rodriguez Fitton, Devontae Davis, Zach Pickens, and Joseph Anderson.
And Belk.
And Pickens and Anderson are considered to be really primo players.
Would Belk fit in there as well?
Belk would be more of an interior.
No, I'm saying what he would count against that number.
I don't think they judge him now. They don't consider him
2019
when they rank a guy that's already committed to one school.
Yeah.
Even
I don't know which class he's going to fit into yet.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I'll explain why in a minute. Defensive lineman Jakeem Green, linebackers Jamar Brown and Derek Boykins, offensive lineman Mark Fox, Vincent Murphy, Jalen Nichols. Of course, the quarterback is Zielinski. Kevin Harris is the running back thus far. Keyshawn Toney and Travion Kenyon, the tight ends. Jamario Holly, the wide receiver. The reason about Belk is I think about when Tyshawn Williams transferred, he paid his own way his first year. They didn't put him into the signing class until the next year.
Gotcha.
So, with Belk, I don't know if he's going to go in the incoming 18 class or the 19 class. We'll have to wait and see.
They're already against the limit there with the 2018 class. We'll talk tomorrow. See you.